The prince ordered the maid to be punished, but when he saw the mark on her shoulder. Before we begin this beautiful period romance story, tell me in the comments where you're listening from. I love knowing where you're joining me from. The corridors of Verona's royal palace hummed with morning activity. The day of honor was approaching, and the servants moved like a river beneath the marble arches, each one carrying trays, candles, or bolts of fabric. Every step echoed under the high ceilings, mingling with the low murmur of nerves. In the Hall of Mirrors, Prince Lorenzo stood before a tall window, his reflection splitting against the glass. The sun touched his uniform of silver and blue, polished to perfection. His jaw was set, his eyes steady. He had ruled the servants for 6 years in his father's name, and not once had anyone dared to speak his name without fear. He turned as the chief chamberlain entered. "Is my cloak ready?" "Yes, Your Highness. It waits on the stand." Lorenzo nodded, crossing to the ceremonial cloak draped over a carved chair. It was the symbol of his station, white silk embroidered with the royal crest. The court would gather in less than an hour to watch him place it over his shoulders before the king and the visiting nobles. Not a thread could be out of place. At that very moment, in the servants' quarter below, Emilia hurried through a narrow corridor with a basin of clean water in her hands. Her steps were quick, her heart faster. She was late. The laundry mistress had been scolding the younger maids, and she had volunteered to deliver the final rinse to the upper hall herself. "Mind your pace, Emilia!" the cook shouted from the kitchen door. "I will," she called back, smiling faintly, though her hands trembled. Her first month at the palace had been a trial of silence and obedience. She had seen the prince only once from afar, during the evening procession. They said he was cold, like marble shaped into a man. Yet the thought of serving at such proximity to greatness thrilled her. She climbed the grand staircase, the basin balanced against her hip, and stepped into the antechamber outside the Hall of Mirrors. The chamberlain turned sharply. "What are you doing here?" "Forgive me, sir. I was told to clean the stand where His Highness's cloak rests." "Be quick. He will be here at any moment." Emilia placed the basin on a stool, dipped a clean cloth into the water, and wiped the surface of the stand. Her movements were careful, reverent. But when she reached for the cloak, a passing page stumbled behind her, knocking her elbow. The basin tilted, and a thin line of dark ink, meant for the calligrapher's desk beside it, splashed across the cloak's shoulder. The chamberlain gasped. "No, no, please!" Emilia stammered, snatching a towel, trying to blot the stain, but the silk absorbed it instantly. The doors opened. Prince Lorenzo stepped in. "What is happening?" His voice cut through the air like a blade. The chamberlain bowed, his face pale. "Your Highness, the maid." Lorenzo's gaze dropped to the cloak. The ink, black and spreading, marred the royal crest. For a heartbeat, no one moved. Then the prince's tone hardened. "Who touched it?" Emilia fell to her knees. "Forgive me, Your Highness. It was an accident. I swear it was not." "You have destroyed the symbol of my house," he said quietly. "Do you understand what that means?" Tears welled in her eyes. "I will repair it. I will—" "You cannot repair what you have stained." He turned to the guards. "Bring her before the court. Let them see what carelessness costs." "Your Highness, I beg you," the chamberlain murmured. "The ceremony will begin with discipline," Lorenzo interrupted. "Obedience is the first honor of Verona." The command echoed across the marble floors. The guards seized Emilia by the arms. She did not resist. Her breath came in small, uneven gasps as they led her through the corridors into the great hall where nobles were gathering for the day of honor. When the trumpet sounded, everyone fell silent. Lorenzo entered, cloakless, his expression unreadable. The king, frail but present, sat upon the throne, watching with quiet confusion. "My son," he said softly, "what is this?" Lorenzo bowed. "A lesson, Your Majesty." He turned to face the servants lined against the walls. Emilia was brought forward. Her pale face was turned to the ground, but every whisper in the hall seemed to rise and settle on her shoulders. "This maid," Lorenzo declared, "has ruined the cloak of ceremony, a symbol of our lineage. Discipline shall be carried out, not in cruelty, but as a reminder that duty is sacred. The nobles murmured approval. Punishment was not uncommon in royal service. But the sight of the trembling girl stirred an uneasy silence. Emilia spoke, her voice barely more than a whisper. "Your Highness, I did not mean—" "Silence," he said sharply, though his eyes flickered for an instant, a trace of hesitation. The chamberlain approached with the traditional mark of disgrace, a torn sleeve, a visible shame to be worn until dismissed from service. He reached for Emilia's arm. She flinched. Lorenzo gave a short nod. "Do it." The sound of ripping fabric filled the hall. Gasps followed as the cloth fell away from her shoulder. For a moment, Lorenzo looked only at her bowed head. Then his gaze dropped to the pale skin revealed beneath the torn fabric. There, above the curve of her shoulder blade, was a faint birthmark, shaped like a crescent moon touching a single star. The prince froze. Every muscle in his body turned to stone. The hall was silent except for the distant rustle of banners. He stepped closer, his voice low and strained. "Where did you get that mark?" Emilia looked up, startled by the change in his tone. I have always had it, Your Highness." He swallowed hard, as if the words tasted like memory. "Since birth?" "Yes, my lord. The sisters at the convent said I was found with it, wrapped in a blue blanket." Lorenzo's breath caught. The king stirred on the throne. "What is it, Lorenzo?" The prince did not answer. He could still see his mother's face as she had described the night her daughter vanished. The night of the fire, 18 years past. "If ever she is found," she had whispered, "you will know her by the mark. A crescent and a star upon her shoulder." He had dismissed the tale as grief's invention. But here it was, living, breathing, standing before him. The hall's murmurs rose again, uncertain now. "Your Highness," said the chamberlain softly, "shall we proceed?" Lorenzo did not hear him. He stared at Emilia as though the world had narrowed to the space between them. "What is your name?" he asked, though he already knew. "Emilia, my lord." He repeated it, as if testing how it sounded on his tongue. "Emilia." The king leaned forward. "Lorenzo, explain yourself." This is not the time for riddles. But the prince remained still, torn between duty and a voice that came from far away. A child's memory, the echo of his mother's lullaby. He remembered her tears, her promise that his lost sister would be found. The courtiers began to exchange uneasy glances. Finally, Lorenzo turned to the assembly. "Release her." The guards hesitated. "Your Highness?" "I said release her." The command rippled through the hall. The nobles looked at one another, whispering behind fans and gloved hands. The king's brow furrowed. "This is most irregular." "Perhaps," Lorenzo murmured, his gaze never leaving the mark. "But justice is not always what it seems." Emilia stood trembling, unsure whether to flee or fall at his feet. The prince stepped forward, lowering his voice so that only she could hear. "Who raised you at the convent? Do you remember who brought you there?" She shook her head. "No, my lord. The sisters said a stranger left me at the gate. I was only a baby. They found me wrapped in silk with a small medallion. But it was taken when I entered service here." "What kind of medallion?" "A silver one, shaped like a crescent and a star." Lorenzo's heart stopped. The same symbol was engraved on his mother's locket, the one she had worn until her death. The chamberlain cleared his throat nervously. "Your Highness, shall I take the maid away?" "No." Lorenzo's tone was calm, but his face had grown pale. "No one touches her." "But sire, the law requires—" "I am the law here," he said, his voice rising. "Leave us." The chamberlain bowed and withdrew, his face tight with confusion. The courtiers followed, murmuring. Soon only the prince, the king, and Emilia remained in the great hall. The king spoke slowly. "My son, what troubles you?" Lorenzo hesitated. "Father, do you recall what mother said before she died?" The old man's eyes clouded. "She spoke many things." "You mean the child?" "Yes." The king's face darkened. "That story again. Let it rest. The child perished in the fire. She said the body was never found." The king's voice grew stern. "Enough, Lorenzo. The past serves no one." Lorenzo turned away. His hands trembled slightly at his sides. Perhaps it serves her. Emilia stood silent, trying to understand the storm behind his words. She could not guess why the prince's gaze burned with such strange intensity. The king rose, weak but firm. "Send the girl back to the servants' wing. The matter is closed." Lorenzo bowed stiffly. "As you command." When the king left the hall, Lorenzo remained motionless for a long moment. The silence between him and Emilia was heavy, almost unbearable. Then he spoke quietly. "You are not dismissed." She looked up, startled. "Your Highness, you will remain in the upper wing until I say otherwise." "Yes, my lord." Her voice trembled. He moved closer, lowering his tone. "Do not speak of what happened today, to anyone. I swear it." He nodded once, then turned and strode out of the hall. The guards escorted her back through the corridors, but this time with uneasy respect. The rumor had already begun to spread. The prince had halted a punishment, and for a maid. In the antechamber, the servants whispered as she passed. What did he say to her? Why did he stop? Emilia kept her eyes lowered. Her heart was still pounding from the humiliation, from the weight of his stare. She could still hear his voice. Not angry now, but confused, almost afraid. When she reached her narrow chamber, she sank to the floor, clutching her torn sleeve. The mark on her shoulder throbbed faintly under the candlelight, as if it, too, remembered being seen. Across the palace, in his private study, Lorenzo paced before the fire. He poured a glass of wine, but did not drink it. His thoughts were racing, tangled between disbelief and hope. He opened the drawer of his mother's desk. Inside lay a small journal bound in pale leather, her handwriting delicate and fading. He turned the pages until he found the entry dated the night of the fire. "The west wing burns. They tell me the cradle was empty. May God keep her safe. She bore the mark of the moon and star. If ever Lorenzo finds her, he must show her mercy, for she will be all I leave behind." The words blurred before his eyes. Could the maid truly be that child? Or was it some cruel twist of chance? A knock came at the door. It was the chamberlain again, bowing low. "Your Highness, the court awaits your return. The ceremony." "Proceed without me," Lorenzo said. "My lord, it would be seen as defiance. Then let it be seen." He dismissed the man with a wave. When the door closed, he leaned against the desk, staring into the flames. For the first time in years, the prince who ruled with iron calm felt his certainty crumble. The image of Emilia's shoulder burned in his mind, not as the mark of a servant, but as a sign from a past that refused to die. He thought of his mother's lullaby, soft and haunting. The melody rose unbidden in his memory, and he heard again the words she had once whispered, "When the moon meets the star, you will know." He pressed a hand to his temple, as if he could silence the memory. Outside, the bells of Verona rang for the ceremony that had begun without him. Inside, silence pressed close, a silence filled with the pulse of revelation and fear. He could not yet name what he felt, not belief, not disbelief, only the sense that his life had just shifted its course. When he finally lifted his head, his reflection in the mirror looked back at him, pale and shaken. He whispered to himself, "Where did you get that mark?" And somewhere in the servants' wing, Emilia, staring at the same mark under her candlelight, murmured to the darkness, "I have had it since the day I was found at the convent gate." The palace woke the next morning in a stir of whispers. Servants moved in cautious silence, carrying trays through corridors where conversation ceased the moment a guard passed. What had begun as a simple act of discipline had turned into something far stranger. The prince, they said, had halted a punishment mid-sentence. He had spoken privately to the maid. He had defied the king's word. In her chamber beneath the servants' wing, Emilia sat on the edge of her narrow bed, the torn sleeve of her dress neatly folded beside her. She had not slept. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw the prince's face again, the way his coldness had cracked, the way his voice had trembled. She touched her shoulder lightly, tracing the birthmark beneath the skin as if to confirm it was real. The door creaked open. The elderly nun, Sister Agnese, stepped inside. Her veil faded from years of service. "Child," she whispered, "you must keep quiet. They say the council is questioning your loyalty." "My loyalty," Emilia frowned. To whom have I been disloyal? I have done nothing wrong. Sister Agnese sighed. Truth matters little when the palace fears embarrassment. They need someone to blame. But the prince will protect himself first. Remember where you stand. Emilia lowered her head, her hands clasped tightly in her lap. He looked at me as if he knew me, she said softly. As if I were someone he'd lost. The nun hesitated. What did he say to you? Only that I must speak of it to no one. The old woman's expression darkened. Then it is worse than I feared. Please, sister, tell me what you mean. But Sister Agnese shook her head, glancing toward the narrow window. There are ears everywhere. Listen to me, Emilia. The mark you bear. Some say it belonged to a child of the royal blood. If they believe you are that child, they will not rejoice. They will fear what it means. Emilia's breath caught. A child of royal blood? It is only rumor, the nun said quickly, and dangerous rumor at that. Say nothing. Keep your head low. She turned to leave, but Emilia caught her sleeve. Sister, please. Do you know something? Was I truly found at the convent gate? The nun hesitated. You were brought there one night by a woman who would not give her name. She begged us to hide you. When we asked who your parents were, she said only, she must never be found. Then she disappeared into the rain. Emilia stared. Never be found? Why? I do not know, Sister Agnese murmured, but I fear someone else does. The door opened abruptly. A guard stood there, helmet glinting. The maid Emilia is summoned by order of the Grand Duchess. She will appear before the council at noon. Emilia rose to her feet, her voice barely steady. Yes, sir. When the guard left, Sister Agnese clasped her hand. Do not be afraid to speak the truth, but measure every word. The truth can free or destroy you. At noon, the council chamber was filled with nobles in heavy coats and anxious expressions. The Grand Duchess sat at the center, her pale face framed by pearls. Lorenzo stood at her right, composed but tense, his hands clasped behind his back. Emilia was led in by two guards. She curtsied, though her knees trembled. The Duchess's voice was cool. You are Emilia, maid to the royal household. Yes, Your Grace. You stand accused of carelessness that dishonored the royal family. Yet it is also said that the prince himself halted your punishment. Explain why. Emilia glanced at Lorenzo. His eyes met hers briefly, a silent warning not to speak of the mark. I do not know, Your Grace, she said. He showed me mercy. The Duchess's gaze sharpened. Mercy? The prince does not grant mercy without reason. What is your history, girl? I was raised by the sisters of St. Celia's convent, Your Grace. I know nothing of my parents. A nobleman leaned forward. And the mark upon your shoulder? There are whispers. Lorenzo spoke before she could. Enough of whispers. The maid's mark is of no consequence. The Duchess turned toward him. No consequence? You halted a public punishment for a servant. Do you deny that it brings shame upon your authority? I will answer for my own actions, Lorenzo said evenly. She will not be questioned about her body. The room murmured with tension. The Duchess's tone turned cold. Your compassion is unexpected, nephew. One wonders if it hides another motive. Lorenzo's jaw tightened. My only motive is justice. Emilia stood silent, her heart pounding. She wanted to speak, to defend him, but her place was not to interrupt. The Duchess raised a hand. Enough. Until this matter is clarified, the maid will remain confined to her quarters. She is not to leave the upper wing without permission. Yes, Your Grace, Emilia said quietly. As she was led away, Lorenzo's voice stopped the guards. Wait. She will have food and warmth. No cruelty. The Duchess gave him a look of warning, but said nothing. That night, the palace was heavy with unease. Lorenzo retreated to his late mother's chamber, a place long sealed since her death. Dust hung in the air. He opened her cedar chest and drew out a bundle of letters tied with a ribbon faded to gray. He read by candlelight, searching for the truth he feared to name. One letter spoke of the night of the fire, another of a loyal maid who vanished the same evening. The final one chilled him. The child lives, hidden by those who fear her claim. I pray she is safe from those who would silence her forever. He dropped the letter onto the table. If Emilia was that child, Then someone in the palace had ordered her disappearance, and someone might still want her gone. The door creaked. His friend and aide, Captain Matteo, entered quietly. "You have not slept, my lord. Tell me what you know of the West Wing fire," Lorenzo said. Matteo frowned. "That was 18 years ago. The records say it began in the servants' nursery. A woman perished. The nursemaid, I think. Nothing more. Her name? I believe it was Rosa." Lorenzo stared into the flame. "Find out if she had family. Anyone who might have taken a child. You suspect something." "I suspect everything," Matteo nodded. "And the maid? She is to remain untouched. Tell the guards that any harm to her will answer to me." Matteo bowed slightly, though concern clouded his face. "Rumors are spreading, my lord. They say she is your mistress." Lorenzo's eyes flashed. "Then let them talk. Lies are safer than the truth." The next morning, Emilia awoke to the sound of voices outside her door. Two maids whispered about her fate. "They say she's to be dismissed." "No, the prince protects her." "Why would he? Unless she's—" The door opened suddenly. Matteo stood there. "The prince requests your presence." Emilia followed him through the winding corridors. When she entered Lorenzo's study, he dismissed the guard and gestured for her to sit. "Do you trust me?" he asked at once. She blinked. I do not know you well enough, my lord." "Fair answer. Then trust my word. You are in danger." Her hands tightened in her lap. "From whom?" "I do not yet know, but the man who served as chamberlain during the night of the fire, he may have known something. He was found dead this morning in the garden pond." Her breath caught. "Dead? How?" "Drowned, though the water was shallow. In his hand was this." Lorenzo placed a damp folded letter on the desk. The seal bore the royal crest. "I found it before the guards did," he said quietly. "It is addressed to my father." "What does it say?" He opened it, reading aloud. "The deed is done. The child has been taken beyond the city walls. None shall know unless the mark betrays her. The throne is secure." Emilia stared at the words, pale as parchment. "The child? Could it mean—" "Yes," Lorenzo said. "You." Her voice broke. "But who would— why—" "Someone who feared your existence. Someone who thought you a threat. But I have never wanted power," she whispered. "I know." His tone softened. "You wanted only to serve, and that is what shames them most." She looked up at him. "What will you do now?" "I will find the truth. I owe it to my mother's memory. But until I do, you must remain hidden. If anyone asks, you are ill." She hesitated. "If they discover this letter—" "They will not. It no longer exists." He tossed it into the fire. The wax seal curled and blackened in the flames. For a long moment, neither spoke. Then Emilia said quietly, "You are risking much for me, my lord." Lorenzo met her gaze. "Perhaps. Or perhaps I am at last correcting what was done long before me." She rose, her voice trembling. "If I truly am that child, then everything I believed about my life is false." "Not false," he said, "only hidden, like truth beneath dust." She turned toward the window, her eyes filling with tears she fought to hide. "I never asked for any of this, nor did I," he murmured. A silence stretched between them, fragile and heavy. Suddenly, footsteps echoed in the corridor. Matteo burst in, breathless. "My lord, the council demands your presence. The king has fallen ill. They fear he may not wake." Lorenzo stood at once. "Summon the physician. He is already there. But the Duchess says the cause is grief. She blames this investigation. She insists that the maid be removed from the palace before dawn." Emilia's face drained of color. "Removed. Banished," Matteo said grimly. "The order is already written." Lorenzo's voice was low but fierce. "Over my dead body." Matteo hesitated. "If you defy the council again, they will accuse you of rebellion. Then let them. I will not allow another innocent to suffer under my name." He turned to Emilia. "You will not be sent away. I will see to it." "But the Duchess—" "She does not command me." Emilia shook her head in disbelief. "You cannot fight them all." Lorenzo's gaze hardened. "Watch me." Outside, Thunder rolled across the evening sky, though no rain fell. In the courtyard below, torches flared against the wind as messengers hurried between wings of the palace. The air was thick with rumor and fear. Emilia stepped closer to the prince, her voice barely a whisper. "What if they come for me tonight? Then they will find me waiting." He moved to the door, calling for Matteo. "Double the guard at her chamber. No one enters without my order." Matteo bowed. "As you command." When Lorenzo turned back to Emilia, her eyes shone with unshed tears. "Why do you protect me, my lord? Out of duty or pity?" He hesitated, his expression softening. "Out of something I cannot yet name." The wind rattled the window panes. From the far end of the corridor came the distant sound of bells, slow, mournful, announcing the king's failing breath. Lorenzo looked toward the sound, his jaw set. "It begins," he said quietly. "And we are not ready." Emilia reached for the edge of the desk to steady herself. "If the king dies, what will they do to me?" "They will make you disappear before the funeral banners are raised," he said. A knock pounded on the door. Matteo returned, his face pale. "My lord, there is more. The Duchess has already sent a messenger. The order for banishment is signed. It will be carried out before the first bell of dawn." Lorenzo's hand clenched on the table. "Then dawn will not come for them as they expect." Matteo's eyes widened. "What are you planning?" Lorenzo looked from his friend to the trembling girl beside him. "I am planning," he said quietly, "to save what remains of my mother's blood." The thunder rolled again, shaking the windows. The fire burned low, the shadows deepening around them. And as the guards in the courtyard prepared for the night watch, a voice whispered through the dark corridors, spreading from servant to soldier, from chamber to hall, that before morning light, the maid who bore the mark of the moon and star would be gone forever. Night fell heavy over the palace of Verona. Clouds rolled above the towers like restless smoke, swallowing the moon. The courtyards lay empty, the fountains stilled. Inside, the corridors were alive with whispers and footsteps. Rumor had turned into fear. The king was dying, the council divided, and the prince defied them all for a servant girl. Lorenzo stood alone in his study, the window open to the cold air. The candlelight trembled across the letters he had gathered, fragments of a secret that refused to stay buried. The letter found in the dead chamberlain's hand had been only the beginning. Now he saw the pattern clearly. Someone in his own bloodline had ordered the disappearance of a child. The motive was power. The consequence was guilt passed through generations. Matteo entered quietly, cloak damp from the mist. "The guards are uneasy, my lord. The Duchess has doubled her watch around the upper wing. She fears you will move the girl." "She fears correctly," Lorenzo said without turning. Matteo frowned. "You cannot oppose the council and hold the crown. They are waiting for the king's last breath to strike." Lorenzo faced him. "If the throne demands silence over truth, then it deserves to crumble. Then at least let me help you crumble it safely." Lorenzo's tone softened. "I will not abandon her, Matteo. Not while I live." He moved to the desk, drawing out another letter, one he had found hidden in his mother's diary. The ink was faded, but legible. "Listen to this," he said. "The child was not burned. Rosa carried her away before the flames reached the nursery. She swore to place her where no one would look, among those who serve rather than rule." Matteo read the line again, his brow furrowed. "Rosa, the nursemaid who died, or who was said to have died. Her body was never recovered. Then she may have lived long enough to deliver the child to the convent." "Exactly." Matteo shook his head slowly. "And whoever wrote the letter found on the chamberlain killed him to keep this buried." Lorenzo nodded. "Someone who still fears the child's name." A knock interrupted them. One of the younger guards entered, pale and nervous. "Forgive me, my lord, but the council has gathered in the West Hall. They request your presence." "Request or demand?" "Demand, my lord." Lorenzo glanced at Matteo. "Keep her safe. If I do not return by dawn, take Emilia and leave Verona." "Leave? To where?" "Anywhere the crown cannot reach." Matteo's jaw tightened. "If I must." Lorenzo placed a hand on his shoulder. "You have served me like a brother. I ask one more loyalty. Protect her life above mine. The guard waited nervously as Matteo bowed in silent agreement. When Lorenzo entered the West Hall, the nobles rose, their faces drawn and cold. The Duchess sat at the head of the table, the royal seal before her. "My lord," she began, "you stand before the council accused of obstructing royal order and concealing a threat to the crown. The maid in question—" "Her name is Emilia," Lorenzo said. The Duchess's expression sharpened. "Is to be removed from the palace before dawn, as decreed. Do you intend to defy this?" "Yes." The word fell into the silence like a stone. A murmur of outrage rippled through the hall. One nobleman stood. "You overstep, Prince Lorenzo. Mercy is a virtue in priests, not in rulers." Lorenzo faced them calmly. "Perhaps that is why rulers so often fall." The Duchess's voice rose. "You risk treason." He leaned forward slightly. "Treason against what, Aunt? Against the truth?" The nobles stirred uneasily. The Duchess signaled to a guard. "Bring the witness." The doors opened. Sister Agnese entered, escorted by soldiers. Her hands trembled as she clutched her rosary. Lorenzo's eyes widened. "Why is she here?" "She was found visiting the maid against orders," the Duchess said. "We thought it best to hear her testimony." The nun bowed. "Your Grace, I meant no harm. I only wished to comfort the girl." "Then tell us," the Duchess pressed. "What do you know of her birth?" Sister Agnese hesitated. Her eyes darted toward Lorenzo, then back to the Duchess. "She was brought to us as an infant. I do not know by whom. I was told to keep her hidden, to never reveal her mark." "Did the messenger bear any sign?" The nun's voice faltered. "Only a silver medallion, a crescent and a star." The hall went still. Lorenzo spoke quietly. "You see, the story is not fantasy. The mark exists. The medallion existed. Both match the emblem my mother kept for her lost child." The Duchess rose from her chair, her face pale. "That proves nothing. Many trinkets bear such symbols. Not with my mother's initials engraved beneath them." Whispers broke through the hall. The Duchess's voice turned cold. "If this girl is who you claim, then she threatens the succession. She would divide the loyalty of the court. Would you risk Verona's stability for a ghost of the past?" Lorenzo's gaze hardened. "I would risk everything for justice." The Duchess struck her cane against the marble floor. "Then you are no Prince of Verona." He straightened. "Perhaps not. Perhaps I am only her son." The tension snapped. Nobles rose, shouting over one another, but Lorenzo's voice carried above them. "Enough. You call this council law, but it reeks of fear. If any harm comes to that girl, you will answer not to the crown, but to me." He turned and strode from the hall, leaving stunned silence behind. Back in the upper wing, Emilia sat by the window, listening to the distant uproar. She could hear the clash of voices carried by the corridors. The city beyond the palace walls was quiet, unaware of the storm gathering above it. The door opened. Matteo entered, followed by Sister Agnese, released from the council at Lorenzo's demand. "You must be ready," Matteo said. "If the council overrules him, they will come before dawn." Emilia stood, frightened. "Where will I go?" "Wherever the prince orders." She shook her head. "I cannot let him risk his life for me." Sister Agnese touched her arm gently. "Child, fate has already chosen your path. All you can do is walk it." "But I do not want a throne," Emilia said, her voice breaking. "I want peace." "Peace," Matteo said softly, "is never granted freely in palaces." The sound of footsteps thundered in the corridor. The door burst open. Lorenzo entered, his cloak unfastened, eyes burning. "They mean to strike tonight," he said. "The Duchess has sent men to escort you to the city gates. Once you cross them, they will claim you fled and end it there." Emilia's hands flew to her mouth. "End it." "Silence you," he said bluntly. "We have little time. Matteo, prepare 2 horses." Sister Agnese stepped forward. "You must not run, my lord. The truth must face daylight, not shadows." Lorenzo turned to her. "If daylight means her death, I will choose the night." Emilia caught his sleeve. "No, I will not let you throw away your honor for me. Honor, he said bitterly, has already been lost in this palace. The nun's eyes filled with tears. You sound like your mother. She too chose compassion over crown. Lorenzo paused. You knew her. Before she married the king, she came to the convent often. She spoke of the daughter she feared she would never hold. I prayed for her every day since. He looked at Emilia. And now that daughter stands before us. A horn sounded from the courtyard below. A sharp, metallic note. The guards were gathering. Matteo appeared at the doorway. The Duchess's men are already on the stairs. Lorenzo drew a breath. Take her through the east passage. There's no exit there, Matteo said. There is, if you know the way. He turned to Emilia. Follow me. They moved quickly through a narrow corridor lined with portraits, the flickering lamps throwing long shadows across the walls. Lorenzo pushed open a hidden door behind a tapestry and led her into a forgotten stairwell. The air was cold and damp. Where does it lead? She whispered. To the chapel beneath the palace. My mother built it in secret when she still hoped to find peace here. They descended in silence until the stone steps opened into a small crypt lit by a single candle. The air smelled of old incense. This is where she prayed for you, Lorenzo said quietly. Before the fire took everything. Emilia looked around, her eyes wide. She prayed here? Yes, and now I understand why. He turned toward her. The candlelight touched his face, revealing the weight of everything he carried. Guilt, hope, the memory of a mother's promise. Emilia stepped closer. What will happen to you if they find us? They will call me traitor. And if we flee? They will call me coward. Then there is no safety. Not yet, he said. But truth has a way of finding air. From above came the distant echo of boots against stone. The guards were searching. Lorenzo moved to a narrow wooden door hidden behind an altar. This leads to the old stables. Once you are there, Matteo will meet you with the horses. She hesitated. And you? I will return to the council. If I vanish, they will hunt us both. If I stay, I can buy you time. Emilia reached for his hand. You would face them alone? For you, he said simply. Her eyes filled with tears. Why do you care so much? You barely know me. He looked at her, the truth burning behind his restraint. Because I think I have always known you. Long before I saw your face. Their hands remained clasped for a heartbeat longer. Then he released her. Go. She stepped toward the door but stopped when a noise echoed from above. The sound of shouting. Matteo's voice rang faintly through the stairwell. My lord! They've sealed the courtyard! Lorenzo turned sharply. Then we are out of time! The chapel door burst open. Soldiers poured in, torches blazing. The Duchess herself appeared behind them, her cane striking the floor. So this is where you hide your shame, she said. How poetic. Lorenzo stepped in front of Emilia. You will not touch her. She is a danger to the throne. She is the throne's forgotten daughter. The Duchess's eyes narrowed. A dangerous claim, without proof. The proof was destroyed by your hand, he said. The letters, the chamberlain, the truth, all burned to keep your secret safe. The Duchess's voice trembled with fury. You accuse your own blood. I defend it, he said. The soldiers raised their torches uncertainly, caught between fear and loyalty. Emilia stepped forward. If my existence brings only ruin, then I will go. Let me leave and spare him. Lorenzo turned sharply. No, but the Duchess smiled coldly. Yes, let her go. She will not survive the road. At that moment, Matteo appeared in the doorway, sword drawn though no weapon left its sheath. Step aside, he said, by the prince's order. The soldiers wavered. The Duchess raised her cane to strike the air. Seize them all! The torches flared. Chaos erupted in the small chapel. Shouts, confusion, the echo of boots on stone. Lorenzo seized Emilia's hand, pulling her toward the hidden door. Run! Matteo blocked the soldiers as long as he could, his voice echoing behind them. Go! I'll hold them! Lorenzo pushed Emilia through the narrow passage into the old stable. The night air hit them, cold and sharp. Horses neighed restlessly in their stalls. She turned, breathless. Matteo. He'll be killed. He knew the risk, Lorenzo said, gripping her shoulders. Now ride until the sun touches the hills. But before they could mount, a shout came from behind. The Duchess's men had found the second entrance. Lorenzo's hand tightened on the reins. It's too late for escape. And from the palace tower, the great bell tolled, slow, deep, unrelenting, announcing the death of the king. The great bell of Verona tolled long into the night. The sound rolled over the rooftops, through the marble corridors, through every chamber of the palace, until even the youngest servant knew the truth. The king was dead. Lorenzo and Emilia stood frozen in the old stable, the air thick with the weight of that single sound. The horses stamped nervously, their breath visible in the cold. Emilia pressed her hands to her face. "He's gone," she whispered. Lorenzo's voice was low. "And with him, the last protection we had." From the corridor beyond the stables came the sound of soldiers calling orders. The Duchess's men were searching every passage. Lorenzo caught Emilia's arm. "We must go, now." "No," she said, shaking her head. "Not like this. Running will only make me guilty of something I've not done. If you stay, they will make you guilty," he answered. "Do you understand? My aunt will seize the throne in my father's name. She will silence every witness who can challenge her." Emilia's voice trembled. "Then stay and fight her in the light of day. Don't become what they accuse you of being." The words stopped him. He looked at her, truly looked at her, and saw not a frightened maid, but someone who refused to hide, someone whose courage burned brighter than his anger. She stepped closer, her voice calm despite her tears. "You are your mother's son. You were born to lead, not to flee." He exhaled slowly, as though the weight of years lifted from his chest. "If I face them, you must stand with me." "I will," she said. "Whatever comes." He nodded. "Then we end this before dawn." When they re-entered the palace, the corridors were lined with torches and mourning banners already being hung by trembling servants. The Duchess had wasted no time. Lorenzo strode through the great doors of the council chamber without announcement. The nobles inside turned sharply, their whispers silenced by his entrance. The Duchess sat at the head of the long table, draped in black silk, though the king's body had not yet cooled. Her cane rested across her knees. "My lord," she said with an icy smile, "you arrive at last. I wondered whether grief had overcome you." "Grief does not blind me," Lorenzo said, "but ambition blinds others." The room stilled. He continued, his voice measured. "My father's last decree was clear. The crown passes to me. Yet I see you wearing mourning as if it were a crown itself." "I wear duty," she replied. "Someone must keep order while you chase ghosts and servants." "I chase truth," he said, "and the truth will not vanish because you deny it." He motioned to the guards at the door. "Bring her in." Emilia entered, head held high, her torn sleeve replaced by plain linen. Gasps moved through the chamber. The nobles shifted uneasily. The Duchess's expression hardened. "You defy my command again." "I obey a higher one," Lorenzo said. "The king's own blood demands justice." He placed his mother's letters on the table. "These were written by the late queen. They record the night the West Wing burned and her infant daughter vanished. They name the nursemaid Rosa, who carried the child away." One of the councilmen leaned forward. "And you claim this servant is that child?" "I do not claim," Lorenzo said. "I show you proof." He took from his pocket a small silver locket, his mother's. The same crescent and star glimmered under the candlelight. "This was my mother's. It matches the medallion Sister Agnesa described. The mark upon Emilia's shoulder bears the same sign. It is not coincidence." The Duchess's hand trembled against her cane. "Forgery," she said sharply. "An invented tale from a desperate prince." Lorenzo's tone deepened. "A tale written by the queen herself? Shall we read her hand aloud?" The nobles exchanged uneasy looks. The Duchess tried to speak, but Lorenzo continued. "You all remember the fire. You remember how quickly it was silenced, how the chamberlain swore the child perished, though no body was found. That same chamberlain was found dead 2 nights ago, with a letter in his hand, confessing the deed." A ripple of alarm moved through the room. Lorenzo's voice rose. "He died to hide the truth you now hear. The truth that my sister lives, and that those who feared her birthright took her from her cradle and buried her name." The Duchess struck her cane on the floor. Lies! Lorenzo faced her squarely. Then swear before this council that you had no part in it. Her silence was long, the kind that tells more than any words. The nobles turned toward her, waiting, doubting. Finally she said, I did what was needed to preserve Verona. The Queen's child would have divided the kingdom. 2 heirs, 1 throne. I spared us war. You murdered peace instead, Lorenzo said quietly. You took an innocent child and condemned her to live without name, without family. Emilia's voice broke the silence. And yet I forgive you. The Duchess turned to her in disbelief. You? Yes, Emilia said softly, because hate would make me like you, and I will not carry that burden. Her words struck the hall like a bell. Even the guards lowered their heads. Lorenzo stepped beside her. You see, the true blood of Verona stands before you, not in pride, but in grace. A nobleman rose slowly. If she is truly of royal birth, then the law declares her princess of Verona. Another nodded. And the rightful heir should rule beside her, not above her. The Duchess's control faltered. You cannot... But Lorenzo's voice cut through hers. The law speaks, Aunt, not I. He turned toward the crowd. Let it be known that Emilia of the Crescent Mark, daughter of Queen Isabella, is restored to her name and title. The hall erupted in murmurs. Some knelt, others bowed their heads. The Duchess, trembling with fury, rose to her feet. You have destroyed us, she hissed. No, Lorenzo said. We have redeemed us. 2 guards stepped forward, uncertain. One of the councilmen spoke quietly. The Duchess shall answer for her actions. No harm will come to her, but her authority ends this day. The Duchess's gaze moved between Lorenzo and Emilia. You think mercy will save you. It never does. Lorenzo looked at her sadly. Perhaps not. But it saves those we lead. She turned and left without another word. The doors closed behind her, and with them, years of fear seemed to leave the room. Silence settled, broken only by the crackle of the torches. Then Lorenzo faced the council. The reign of fear ends tonight. Tomorrow we bury the king as a father, not as a symbol. Verona will rise clean of secrets. He turned to Emilia. Are you ready to stand before them? Her eyes shimmered with tears. If you stand with me. He offered his hand. Always. They walked together toward the throne, not as ruler and servant, but as brother and sister. The nobles watched in reverence as Emilia, once the humblest maid in the palace, took her place beside the heir. When the court was dismissed, dawn was breaking beyond the windows. The palace, once shadowed by deceit, was bathed in pale gold. In the quiet that followed, Lorenzo and Emilia stood in the garden where the king's banners fluttered at half-mast. Birds began to stir in the trees. Emilia spoke first. What will happen to her? The Duchess? Lorenzo asked. She will live under guard. She is still family, even if she forgot what that means. Emilia nodded slowly. Do you think the people will accept me? They already do, he said. They will see your courage and call it noble. She smiled faintly. I don't feel noble. I feel human. That, Lorenzo said, is what makes you noble. She looked at him then, truly seeing the man behind the crown, the boy who had lost his sister and found her again in the unlikeliest way. I thought you would hate me, she whispered. I did, he admitted. For a moment, when I believed you'd ruined the cloak, I hated you. But then, you became the reason I saw what I had become. You gave me back more than a sister. You gave me mercy. Tears slipped down her cheeks, though she smiled through them. And you gave me a name. He reached out, brushing her hand lightly. Keep it with pride. You have earned it. A group of servants approached hesitantly. One of them, the cook who had once scolded Emilia, bowed deeply. Your Highness, she murmured. Emilia's cheeks flushed. Please. I am still Emilia. The cook smiled. Then Verona is fortunate to have an Emilia for its princess. The servants retreated, leaving the two alone again. Lorenzo watched the light spread across the marble terrace. Tomorrow will be long, he said quietly. The coronation, the funeral, the vows before the council. She turned to him. "And after tomorrow?" He looked at her with warmth. "After tomorrow we begin again." The chapel bells began to ring for morning prayers. The sound was softer now. No longer a warning, but a promise. Emilia took a deep breath. "I want to visit the convent one day," she said, "to thank the sisters. To tell them the child they hid has come home." "You shall," he said. "And when you do, I will ride beside you." For a long while they stood in silence, the garden waking around them. At last Emilia said, "Do you think our mother would be proud?" Lorenzo smiled faintly. "I think she is smiling now." They walked back toward the palace, their steps steady, side by side. The halls that once echoed with fear now carried the soft murmur of renewal. As they passed the servants' wing, Emilia stopped. "I will never forget this place," she said. "It taught me that dignity has nothing to do with titles, nor with crowns," Lorenzo replied. He looked toward the great doors of the throne room where the council waited once more. "Are you ready to face them?" She drew herself up, her voice steady. "Yes, let the truth crown us, not shame us." They entered together, the doors closing behind them as sunlight poured through the windows. And for the first time Verona's court rose not out of fear, but in respect for two souls bound by blood, by forgiveness, and by the courage to stand in the light. The city of Verona had never seen a dawn like that one. Bells rang from every tower, bright and unbroken, announcing not only mourning for the late king, but also the beginning of a new reign. The air carried the scent of spring and candles, of something clean, reborn. Crowds filled the palace square long before sunrise, waving white handkerchiefs and murmuring prayers for peace. Inside, servants hurried through corridors, now lined with garlands of laurel. For the first time in years, the palace was filled not with fear but with music. Laughter echoed faintly where whispers once reigned. In her chamber, Emilia stood before the mirror, her hands clasped over her heart. The dress she wore was simple, ivory silk trimmed with silver thread, but her eyes made it radiant. She had refused the heavy crown and jewels that the council offered, choosing instead a small pendant in the shape of a crescent and a star. Sister Agnese adjusted the pendant's clasp and smiled. "You look as your mother once did." Emilia turned toward her. "You think she would be proud?" "She would be at peace," the nun said softly. "You have turned the kingdom from judgment to mercy." "That is a queen's work." Emilia smiled faintly. "I do not feel like a queen." "Then you are ready to be one." There was a knock at the door. Lorenzo stepped in, wearing his formal uniform, his cloak clasped with the royal crest. His hair was slightly tousled, his face serious, but softened by something gentler than command. Sister Agnese curtsied and slipped out quietly, leaving them alone. For a long moment, they simply looked at each other. "You came early," Emilia said. "I could not wait," he replied. "The council is restless. They wish to begin." She smiled nervously. "And you?" He moved closer. "I wish to speak before the ceremony." Her breath caught. "Speak of what?" "Of what comes after." He stopped a few steps away, his voice steady but low. "We will rule together, you and I. But I will not see you shut away behind a throne. I want you free. I want Verona to see that strength and kindness can reign side by side." Emilia's eyes filled with emotion. "Then we will rule not as master and servant, but as brother and sister." He hesitated, his gaze softening. "Yes, as brother and sister, but also as something more." She blinked in surprise. "More? The council will speak of politics, alliances, heirs," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. "But I have thought of none of that. I have thought only of how you changed me. You taught me that power means nothing if it cannot protect what is good. You gave me back my heart." Her eyes shone. "You gave me my name." Lorenzo smiled slightly. "Then we are even." A trumpet sounded in the courtyard, sharp and golden. The ceremony was beginning. He offered his arm. "Shall we?" Emilia took it, her hand trembling slightly against his sleeve. Together they walked through the marble halls, now flooded with morning light. The doors of the throne room opened, and 1,000 faces turned toward them. The nobles rose. The crowd outside fell to a hush. Lorenzo led her to the dais, where 2 thrones stood side by side, draped in white silk. The archbishop stepped forward, his voice echoing through the vast room. By the will of heaven and the blood of our late sovereign, we crown Prince Lorenzo, King of Verona, and his sister Princess Emilia, as keeper of the royal line. He lifted 2 crowns, one of gold, one of silver, and set them gently upon their heads. The hall erupted in applause, a wave of joy that seemed to shake the very walls. Emilia looked out at the sea of faces, at the servants who once feared her presence, now smiling with pride. Tears rose to her eyes. She turned to Lorenzo, and for a heartbeat, time stood still between them. He took her hand and raised it for all to see. "Verona," he said, "kneels not to fear, but to hope. Let this day be remembered not for death, but for life reborn." The crowd cheered, voices rising like music. Bells rang again, louder this time, carrying through the city and out to the distant hills. When the ceremony ended, the feast began. Musicians played in the courtyard, and the people filled the streets. The palace gates stood open for the first time in years, and no guard turned anyone away. Lorenzo and Emilia moved among the crowd, greeting nobles and townsfolk alike. Children offered flowers, merchants bowed, soldiers saluted. An elderly baker pressed a loaf into Emilia's hands. "For good fortune, my lady." She laughed. "For good appetite, I hope." Lorenzo smiled beside her. "You have already won them, you know. They love you. I am one of them," she said simply. "How could I not love them in return?" As the sun dipped low, lanterns were lit along the fountains, reflecting in the water like stars. Music drifted from every corner of the square. When the first dance began, Lorenzo extended his hand toward Emilia. "Will you dance with your king?" She laughed softly. "You are my brother, and my partner in rule," he said. "Tonight, we dance for Verona." She hesitated only a moment before taking his hand. They stepped into the center of the courtyard as the violins began to play. A slow, graceful melody that spoke of reunion and peace. Around them, the people formed a wide circle, clapping to the rhythm. Lorenzo's movements were measured, his posture proud, but his eyes never left hers. "You move well for a king," she teased. He smiled. "You move better for a queen who was once a maid." She blushed. "That maid once tripped over buckets." "Then I thank the heavens for buckets." Their laughter mixed with the music. The dance quickened, their steps weaving through light and shadow, past fountains and flowers, until the music slowed again to a gentle close. When the last note faded, the crowd erupted in applause. Lorenzo bowed to her deeply. She curtsied in return, her cheeks flushed, her eyes bright. The evening passed in celebration. Torches lined the palace gardens, tables overflowed with food. Matteo, healed and grinning, raised a glass to them. "To the king who found his sister, and to the sister who gave us back our king." Cheers followed. Emilia laughed through tears. Later, as the festival quieted and the stars brightened, Lorenzo and Emilia slipped away from the revelers to the terrace overlooking the city. Below them, the lights of Verona glowed like constellations upon the earth. For a long moment, neither spoke. Finally, Emilia said softly, "It feels strange to be loved so suddenly." "You earned it," he said. "You made them believe in gentleness again." She turned toward him. "And you, Lorenzo? What did you earn tonight?" He looked at her, his expression unreadable. "Forgiveness, perhaps, for what I was." "You were never cruel by nature," she said. "You were only afraid." "And you?" he asked gently. "Are you afraid now?" She smiled. "Not with you beside me." He stepped closer. The night breeze caught her hair, carrying the faint scent of laurel and candle wax. "I will protect you," he said. "Not because duty demands it, but because my heart does." She lowered her gaze. "You speak as though you love me." He hesitated, his voice unsteady for the first time. "In a way I do. Not as a brother loves a sister, though that bond is sacred, but as a man loves the soul that saved him. You remind me that mercy is strength." Her eyes glistened. "And you remind me that power can be kind." He smiled faintly. "Then perhaps we complete each other." The bells began to ring again, softer this time, echoing through the valley. He took her hand, pressing it gently to his chest. "The kingdom will look to us for guidance," he said. "Let them see love, not authority. Let them see what peace looks like." She nodded. "Let them see what family looks like." They stood together in silence, watching the lanterns drift skyward, glowing against the night like fragile wishes. Lorenzo said quietly, "Do you remember the first day we met? The ink, the cloak, the fear?" She laughed softly. "I remember thinking you were made of marble." "And you?" he asked. "What were you made of?" "Hope," she said, smiling. "And clumsiness," he chuckled. "Hope endures. Clumsiness fades." She met his gaze. "Then hope has brought us here." The last of the music faded from the courtyard. Only the sound of wind remained, moving through the olive trees. Lorenzo turned to her, his voice barely above a whisper. "You have changed me, Emilia. Before you, I ruled in silence. Now I wish to live in sound, the sound of laughter, of music, of hearts that no longer fear." She looked at him, her eyes shimmering with tears she did not try to hide. "Then promise me one thing, anything. Never forget the servants, the people who bow but still bleed. Promise that Verona will belong to them too." He took her hand again, clasping it firmly. "I swear it." "Then you are truly a king," she said. He leaned forward and pressed a kiss to her forehead. "And you are truly free." The city bells began their midnight song. Fireworks bloomed above the rooftops, scattering color across the sky. The people below cheered once more for their new sovereigns. Lorenzo and Emilia watched in silence, the light painting their faces gold. After a long moment, Emilia whispered, "It feels as though the stars have come down to dance." Lorenzo smiled. "Then let them dance for us." He held out his hand once more, and there, under the rain of sparks and music, they danced, slowly, quietly, as if the night itself had stopped to watch. When the last firework faded and the bells fell silent, Verona slept in peace for the first time in a generation. Lorenzo turned to her, his voice soft but certain. "The crown rests on our heads, but love rests in our hands. Let us keep it safe." Emilia's eyes shone as she answered, "Together, always." The moon rose high above the palace, bright as the mark on her shoulder. The wind carried the scent of laurel and the promise of a gentler age. Lorenzo looked at her one last time, the words leaving his lips like a vow. "You have given me back more than a kingdom. You have given me myself." Thank you so much for listening to this story all the way to the end. We hope it moved you as much as it moved us while telling it. We'd love to hear your thoughts. Leave us a comment telling us where you're listening from and what you liked the most. Rate this story from 0 to 10. What score would you give it? If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to subscribe to the channel and leave a like as a show of support. That really motivates us to keep creating and sharing more stories full of emotion and life lessons. And before we go, we want to remind you that an exciting and heartwarming story recommendation will appear on the final screen. If you'd like to enjoy it, just click on the video. Thank you once again for being here, and we'll see you in the next story.